Hi, everyone. Trump is making immigration one of his top priorities again. He's talking about using executive action to restore what he calls unprecedented order. And honestly, this isn't new for him. He's been focused on this since his first campaign. What really caught my attention was the shift in deportation priorities. There's talk about over 1 million people being targeted. That's a staggering number. And who exactly will be on the priority list for deportation under Trump? That's the topic I want to talk about a bit in this video, all right? When we compare the Trump administration to Biden's, there are some big differences in how they handle immigration. Trump has always been very strict about immigration policies. He's focused on tightening the border between Mexico and the U.S. to stop the flow of people crossing into the U.S. easily, like we've seen in recent years. Under Biden, things have been a lot more relaxed. Many people have been crossing the border and then being transported to different cities. You know how it is. They're put on buses and sent to places across the country. It's been a lot easier for people to make it into the U.S. But here's the thing. When the administration shifts from Biden to Trump, starting on January 20th, 2025, we're going to see a big change in priorities. One of the very first things Trump is planning to tackle is illegal immigration. He's going to crack down even harder on the situation, making it much tougher for people to enter the U.S. illegally. So the question really becomes, who is going to be on his priority list for deportation, and how will this impact communities across the country? That's what we'll focus on today. When Trump takes office, one of his main priorities will be tackling immigration, and certain groups of people are expected to be at the top of the deportation list. Let's go through what this might look like. First on the list are those with final deportation orders. These are people who have already gone through the entire legal process, including hearings and appeals, and they no longer have any legal status to stay in the United States. At this point, their time here is considered over, and they're likely to be prioritized for removal. Another group includes undocumented immigrants with criminal records. The severity of the offenses is expected to play a role in who is targeted first, but even minor infractions could make someone eligible for deportation. It's not limited to major crimes. Less serious violations could also lead to action. There's also a focus on individuals who have been deported before but returned to the U.S. Coming back after deportation is considered a serious violation, and these individuals are likely to face immediate attention under stricter enforcement measures. This approach suggests major changes in immigration enforcement priorities. These plans will likely lead to more aggressive measures targeting specific groups, and it's important to think about how this could affect families and communities across the country. It's a significant shift that will shape immigration policy going forward. So these are the people who could be at the top of the priority list for deportation when Trump takes office. But what about those who don't have legal status but haven't committed any crimes? Well, for now, they're not the main focus. However, that doesn't mean they're completely safe. They could still face deportation proceedings, especially if enforcement efforts are expanded. Then there's the topic of asylum seekers, which gets even more complicated. Trump is once again talking about reducing the number of asylum approvals. Do you remember during his first term? The cap was brought down to just 15,000 approvals. That was the lowest in history. For those currently waiting for a decision, the situation is tough. They're in this legal gray area, not residents, but also not immediately facing deportation. Here's the tricky part. If their application gets denied, they could quickly become a priority for removal. And it doesn't end there. Even those who had asylum status in the past aren't necessarily safe. If for some reason they've lost that status, maybe due to a violation or some other issue, they could also be deported. It's a very tough and uncertain situation for many, and the policies Trump is proposing will likely make it even harder for those who are trying to stay in the country legally. These priorities highlight just how strict the enforcement measures might be under the new administration. Oh, and if someone commits a crime while waiting for their asylum decision, that's an automatic ground for denial. It's not just about sitting and waiting. You've got to stay on the straight and narrow the entire time. Any legal trouble during that period can completely jeopardize the process and lead to immediate deportation proceedings. It's a tough road, and the stakes are incredibly high. What about those who start crossing the border during Trump's term? New border crossers? That's an entirely different situation. Under Biden, many of them were allowed to stay in the U.S. while waiting for their asylum applications to be processed. But Trump seems to want to take a completely different approach. He's talking about immediate deportations, detaining individuals as soon as they cross, and putting a stop to the catch and release policies. It's a huge shift in how border crossings are handled. Instead of letting people wait inside the country for their cases to be processed, the focus will be on detaining or deporting them as quickly as possible. This marks a significant change from what we've seen over the past few years. If someone crosses into the U.S. illegally and wants to stay to apply for adjustment of status, aiming to become a lawful permanent resident, there's a clear difference in policy between Biden and Trump. Under Biden, those who entered the U.S. illegally have been allowed to remain in the country while their applications are being processed. They can stay in the U.S. while waiting for their cases to move forward. But Trump takes a completely different approach. According to his policies, if someone wants to apply for legal status after entering the U.S. illegally, they should return to their home country to file the application. The idea is that they shouldn't be allowed to stay in the U.S. while waiting for their paperwork to be reviewed. Trump's policy is strict. No staying in the U.S. illegally and applying from within the country. This represents a significant difference between the two administrations, as we've discussed earlier. It shifts the process back to requiring individuals to follow the rules from outside the country rather than living in the U.S. while their applications are being processed. All right, this is the topic about immigration that I want to share and talk about in this video. It's related to what could happen when the administration changes, specifically when Trump takes office, and the potential actions surrounding immigration and deportation. Who could be on the priority list for deportation under Trump's administration? That's a little of what I've shared in this video. I'll see you again in upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.